In this video, we're comparing the Wim Hof method with the oxygen advantage. Don't confuse, look, it's me, Jacko, just doing my Wim Hof impression. If you haven't yet subscribed, click on subscribe, and I hope you're going to enjoy this video where we're going to look at the differences between the Wim Hof method and the oxygen advantage. The first and main difference with the oxygen advantage is it's purely 100% about breathing, whereas the Wim Hof method has three elements, of which breathing is one of them. So breathing is only a third of the Wim Hof method. The other is the ice and cold exposure and the mindset. The breath work in the Wim Hof method is not teaching you how to breathe better, it's using breathing as a tool. Whereas the oxygen advantage uses breathing techniques and breathing exercises to improve the way that you breathe in all aspects of your life. Your day-to-day breathing, your sports performance breathing, your exercise breathing, your breathing for stress management, any element of breathing, and it's looking at teaching us how to actually breathe better in all of those different scenarios. So let's get into the science, let's drop the role play and let's get serious. Let's be upfront and clear from the start. Wim Hof has done some incredible things in personally, as well as the techniques, the effect they're having on the people that he teaches. There's a study that's been done on him around the endotoxin, but then also you get people reporting that they've completely got rid of cancer from their body following things. So there's some real, tangible, amazing, crazy things happening, and it's starting to be studied more, and we'll dive into one of the studies later. The other thing to be honest about, I'm a master instructor with the oxygen advantage. I have practiced Wim Hof technique and I've practiced the oxygen advantage techniques. I personally get on better with the oxygen advantage techniques, and there's more beneficial to me in my life and my current context. So I do teach the oxygen advantage techniques as part of my job, but that doesn't mean that I haven't tried the Wim Hof method, and doesn't mean that I can't make a fair comparison between the two, or at least try to make a fair, objective comparison between the two. So let's look at a little bit of detail around the science of what's going on. The oxygen advantage is looking at how we breathe and teaching us how to breathe. Wim Hof method, the breathing element is just 1/3, and it's using breathing as a tool to make changes. So you'll hear Wim Hof say things like, it doesn't matter for this exercise whether you breathe in through the nose or the mouth, it's just get the air in, because it's using the breathing as a tool. Whereas when we're talking about breathing and teaching proper breathing mechanics, we're looking at how we breathe and where we breathe into with the oxygen advantage. That's like one of the key main differences, and a lot of the emphasis being on utilizing and getting better at nasal breathing, being able to breathe with the diaphragm, connect to your diaphragm, and correct rib biomechanics to facilitate good diaphragmatic breathing. So there's a bit of a difference there, but understanding why there is a difference. With the oxygen advantage, we're teaching how to breathe better compared to the Wim Hof method, where we're using breathing as a tool. So clearly there are elements that are very different, and therefore it's not really fair to make a comparison between two things that are trying to do two very different elements. But I understand why people ask the question, ask a lot in terms of like, which is better or what are the differences. And so one of the best fairest comparisons to make is between the Wim Hof method, the cycles of hyperventilation, followed by the breath hold retention, comparing what happens within the body there in terms of the physiology and the oxygen and CO2 that's happening, and comparing that with the simulation of high altitude training, which is one pillar of the oxygen advantage techniques. So being very clear from the top level, and then we'll delve into the science a little bit and we'll look at some of the data so you can see what we're actually talking about. But from a top level, the oxygen advantage comparing to the Wim Hof method with the simulation of high altitude training from the oxygen advantage compared to the hyperventilation retentions from the Wim Hof method. With the oxygen advantage, we do the breath holds after an exhalation, and that creates the strongest hypoxic hypercapnic result. And that is, hypoxic is a fancy word for low oxygen, and hypercapnic is a fancy word, scientific word, for high CO2. So the oxygen advantage breath holding techniques to elicit some changes in our adaptation to CO2 tolerance and spleen contractions, EPO production, happens from the low oxygen and the high CO2. With the Wim Hof method, after you've done the hyperventilation rounds and the retentions, we get a low oxygen, so the same hypoxia, or actually potentially stronger hypoxia, we'll look at the data in a second, but then it's not high CO2, it's also low CO2, so it's hypocapnic. So there's a top level, the biggest differences between those two parts of the technique. With the oxygen advantage, it's low oxygen, high CO2, so hypoxic, hypercapnic. With the Wim Hof method, it's hypoxic, hypocapnic, meaning low oxygen and low CO2. So the biggest difference within those two breath holding elements is the levels of CO2 that's going on in the body. And I think the best way to understand this is to look at some of the data on that. So let's jump into a little bit of that, and then we'll clear it all up and make it crystal clear for you to finish with. Here I am down in the bottom corner. So let's delve into the science and just recap on a few things before we look at some actual data from one of the studies that's been done. Wim Hof versus the oxygen advantage. Wim Hof, low oxygen, low carbon dioxide after those rounds of hyperventilation. So that means it's hypoxic, hypocapnic. Oxygen advantage, when we're comparing the breath holding elements of it, the oxygen advantage done after a normal exhale with no hyperventilation is low oxygen, so it's hypoxic as well, but it's hypercapnic. The CO2 is high. That's the big main difference when we're comparing these two breathing techniques from a breath holding perspective. They are both low oxygen, but Wim Hof method is low carbon dioxide, whereas the oxygen advantage is high carbon dioxide. That's against different factors and different responses and adaptations from the body. With the Wim Hof method, just reminding ourselves the breathing element of it is just 1/3 of the full technique. That isn't taken into account the ice and the meditation. So it's only 1/3 of it. So it's not fair comparison anyway, like I said at the start. And it's using breathing as a tool to make changes and control the sympathetic nervous system, the immune system, and to help with inflammation. Some of the studies have shown some amazing things that has been done, and we're going to look at some of the data from that. The oxygen advantage being more about breathing is the whole thing, and functional breathing biomechanics and biochemistry. So the mechanics is like, how are we actually breathing? Whereas we don't address that with the Wim Hof method. The biochemistry is to do with sensitivity to carbon dioxide, which the hypercapnic element of it helps us to improve our sensitivity to carbon dioxide buildup. It addresses how we should breathe day to day, as well as things like sports performance and recovery from exercise and sports, as well as things like stress management, focus, and anxiety. Being able to use our breathing to be able to control the stress response and reduce overall stress within the body, as well as using it as a powerful tool to help improve sporting performances. So there's some of the key differences between the two. I can't highlight this enough, when we're comparing them in terms of the breath holding elements, okay, rather than understanding that it is not a completely fair comparison, but people always ask this question, and that's why I'm making obviously this video. Okay, so there was a study done by Cox et al. Cox and his mates in 2014. It was in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and this is where they injected people with endotoxins that Wim Hof had trained them. It wasn't even on, he'd already done it to himself, but trained a group of people. There was 21 subjects maybe, but two groups, one that got trained in the Wim Hof method, one that didn't. The group that didn't get trained in the Wim Hof method, which include the breath, the ice, and the meditation, they that didn't have that, they got ill from the endotoxin. The group that did do the Wim Hof method, which was those three things, not just the breathing, it was the breathing, the ice, and the meditation, they didn't get ill. And it was like, people were, and everyone is still amazed trying to figure out what was going on with that. And that's looking at that sympathetic nervous system response, looking at the immune response, and looking at reducing inflammation, things that previously no one believed was actually within control. So Wim has been doing some amazing stuff to not just push the boundaries, like smash the boundaries of what we thought was possible, and just rewrite, as he would say, rewriting the science textbooks. What we're going to look at for this comparison is the data from that study in 2014 about the oxygen levels within the body and the carbon dioxide levels after the rounds of hyperventilation. Okay, so that's where we're going to be comparing. So typically, this is the data from one round of hyperventilation, second round, third round. So there's like 20 or 30 breaths of hyperventilation followed by a breath retention, a breath hold. Because during that hyperventilation, we're getting rid of a lot of carbon dioxide, it's easy for people to hold our breath for 1, 2, 3 minutes. We're taking away that stimulus to breathe by over breathing, getting rid of carbon dioxide. During the breath retention, as we're holding the breath and CO2 levels are building back up, oxygen is leaving the blood. So after the first round of hyperventilation and then holding the breath, as CO2 is coming back up, having got rid of it all, gradually that carbon dioxide is going to allow the oxygen to be released from the red blood cells, as carbon dioxide is that catalyst. We know this from the Bohr effect. The carbon dioxide is the catalyst that's allowing oxygen to be released from the red blood cells. And as we're holding the breath during that first breath retention after the hyperventilation, it will drop to about 85%, which is similar to the type of SpO2 drop we would get in a challenging 30-second exhale breath hold, so a breath hold done after a normal exhalation with no hyperventilation at all, as we would do with the oxygen advantage, where being an SpO2, so blood oxygen saturation around 85, is equivalent to being about 4,000 meters of altitude, something like that. Okay, and that's a typical value that we would get with someone doing a breath hold with the oxygen advantage techniques. When, with the Wim Hof Method, they went into their second round of hyperventilation, SpO2 went back up to 100. Potentially it would be more like 99%. It's not, to get 100 mean nothing is leaving. But went back up. And then the greater drop on the second breath retention, so the second round of a cycle of hyperventilation would be another 20 or 30 breaths of hyperventilation and then another breath retention. And that second breath retention would probably be longer in duration as well. Blood oxygen saturations dropped further in the second, down to 75. Okay, and then on the third cycle of hyperventilation, we then get this this deeper drop in blood oxygen saturation down to as low as 50%. Now, when we are doing hyperventilation, over-breathing, we're getting rid of a lot of carbon dioxide during that hyperventilation to the point where it's very easy to hold our breath because we're taking away that stimulus to breathe, or primary stimulus to breathe. Remember that carbon dioxide is the thing that makes moment by moment changes in our blood pH, and hence why the chemoreceptors are very sensitive to changes in carbon dioxide and pH. Those are the chemoreceptors in the brainstem that are monitoring our breathing and monitoring that pH. So the body is using the breath as a way to modulate the pH of the blood. The breath retention on that third cycle, when it's that stacking effect, you can see after the first breath retention, 85. Second breath retention, blood oxygen saturation down to 75. Third breath retention, SpO2 dropping as low as 50. At 50 is where the peripheral, so there's the central chemoreceptors are monitoring more so the pH and carbon dioxide. The more peripheral chemoreceptors will respond to low blood oxygen saturations of around about 50. So 50 is the point where people might pass out, and that can happen with those hyperventilation practices. When your blood oxygen saturation drops that low, the stimulus to breathe then may start to kick in from those peripheral chemoreceptors that are responsive to those more dramatic drops in blood oxygen saturation, but does need to get as low as 50. Now that is a far greater drop in blood oxygen saturation than you're going to get with a challenging exhale breath hold like with the oxygen advantage, because with the oxygen advantage you wouldn't be doing the hyperventilation before. CO2, remember, is staying really high. You're never getting rid of that carbon dioxide, and so the duration of the breath hold is going to be much more like 30, 35, 40 seconds, whereas the breath retention on that third hold after 3 rounds of the Wim Hof method, that could be a 2-minute, 3-minute breath hold, because initially you've got rid of that stimulus to breathe. Okay, so that's one big difference. The drop in SpO2 is dramatically more. Okay, and it's like there's a stacking effect. It's building up gradually. Okay, what's really important then? So we know that the differences between the Wim Hof method and oxygen advantage is low. They're both low oxygen, but we've just seen there that the amount of hypoxia that you're going to create with the Wim Hof method is much stronger. So you will get some of those increases in EPO production from the kidneys as a response to the low hypoxia, like we get in like you'd get with the oxygen advantage as well. The big difference, and this is the thing to hammer home and get your head around, is the amount of carbon dioxide that you get rid of, and then importantly where it goes back up to. So it doesn't matter. We've got kilopascals in terms of pressure, and then milligrams of mercury pressure. So there's just two scales of carbon dioxide pressure. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one we use. That's just because they follow the same thing. They're measuring the same thing, effectively. Let's take the first column. So carbon dioxide levels in kilopascals. Before they started doing the breathing exercise, the hyperventilation, 4.49. Okay. After one cycle of hyperventilation, it dropped down. Remember, we're over breathing, so we're getting rid of carbon dioxide. It dropped down by more than half, down to 2.11. Okay. Then we'll hold the breath. Yeah, no more. Then the oxygen is going to start to go down. CO2 is going to come back up gradually. And after the first breath retention, we got that stimulus to breathe and would breathe in, but CO2 levels actually only didn't go back up to where it was before. It went back up to only 4.01. And then we get this then stacking effect like we saw with the blood oxygen saturation. The second round of hyperventilation, we get rid of some more. So the first round, we got it down to 2.1. The second round of hyperventilation, your carbon dioxide levels are going down even lower, 2.03. And then the breath retention, oxygen is going to start to then go down during that breath retention. As you're holding the breath, CO2 will come back up, and then you'll get that stimulus to breathe eventually. But they didn't come back up as high as they did before. So 3.76 on the second breath retention. So then you're starting your third round of hyperventilation with an even lower level of carbon dioxide level. And after the third round of hyperventilation, getting rid of more carbon dioxide and it's stacking again down to 1.69. And then we hold the breath. As we hold the breath, blood oxygen saturation is going to go down, CO2 is going to come back up, but it doesn't come back up as high as it did before. And it is, significantly less than it was at the start after that final breath retention. So one of the things that's important with this is understanding that carbon dioxide for our day-to-day breathing is our primary stimulus to breathe. When we are exposing the body to higher levels of carbon dioxide, i.e. in a exhale breath hold like with the oxygen advantage, you are exposing the body to higher levels of carbon dioxide, which then the chemoreceptors in the brain adapt to and become less sensitive to carbon dioxide, which can then help you with your carbon dioxide tolerance. That will help with your control of your breath. That will help with your control of your breath during exercise. It will help slow down your general day-to-day breathing to have a calmer, slower breath. The Wim Hof method is having the low oxygen, but also having lower levels of carbon dioxide. And if we don't do anything to address the low levels of carbon dioxide after that third retention, then we're potentially exposing the body to low levels of carbon dioxide, which will mean it will become, in its adaptation to the carbon dioxide, it will become more sensitive to carbon dioxide, which might not be beneficial for a lot of people in terms of how those chemoreceptors are then going to get stimulated to breathe. So this is the sort of big take-home message, as I personally have been taught, and personally, currently, it's important currently, because we find out new things all the time, currently understand with the comparison of when people are asking that question, like Wim Hof method compared to the oxygen advantage, and can we combine the two? Should we combine the two? And the big thing is about this effect on our carbon dioxide levels. That's the big take-home message from this. Okay, so when we are comparing these two things, to summarize what we're going to talk about, I'm going to try to help you understand how we can potentially link the two things together. Understanding that key difference is to do with carbon dioxide. A greater drop in blood oxygen saturation, but you get a drop in blood oxygen saturation in both. Just stronger with the Wim Hof method after those second and third rounds, similar after the first round. Okay, with the hypoxia, it's like the altitude training, or part of altitude training effectively gets. Both of them are going to give us an increase in EPO production, which can help with increasing red blood cell count and overall oxygen carrying capacity of the blood over a longer period of time. But the things that I want us to take away and understand is, and particularly appreciate, the effect on carbon dioxide sensitivity. If I want to improve my carbon dioxide tolerance, I need to expose the body to periods of time where carbon dioxide levels are a little higher rather than getting rid of it all the time. Now, this isn't to say then, therefore, oh no, you shouldn't do Wim Hof. It's understanding what is the reason you are doing the breathing exercise and what are the adaptations that you are trying to create and experience. That's the big take-home message for me. Understanding what do you want and then choosing the right exercise, the right breathing technique for that specific purpose at that specific time, and understanding what it is that you're doing to your body, how your body will respond physiologically to the best of our knowledge, and then you can make an informed decision about which exercises you do, when you do them, and how often you do them. And within that, understanding how your body is responding. If you're quite sensitive already to carbon dioxide, a little bit prone to panic attacks and that type of thing, you might find strong breath holds a little bit challenging, and you might get on better with the Wim Hof method, but compared to the oxygen advantage breath holding. But then there's also the fact that the hyperventilation might feel like that's how I breathe when I have a panic attack. So the hyperventilation part of the Wim Hof method might make you feel like you're creating the similar conditions to having a panic attack, and that might make you very anxious and very stressful. So it's very personal, it's very individualized in terms of going through that process, and that's why I feel it's important that we understand what is going on. And so understanding that carbon dioxide is that main trigger to breathing. With things like stress and anxiety, we know from other research that's been done around the effect of carbon dioxide on people with anxiety and people that don't have anxiety, is that the more sensitive we are to carbon dioxide, the more prone you are to the potential for panic attacks, anxiety disorders. So improving our sensitivity, so being less sensitive, improving our tolerance of carbon dioxide, in my opinion, and backed up by what the science and the research is telling us, is that we want to improve that. So spending some time where I do expose myself to high levels of carbon dioxide. That doesn't have to be done with a strong breath hold. That can be done with something like a breathing light exercise. There's some links on my YouTube for breathing light exercises in my app. There's a whole, in the Pro Breathwork app, there's a whole 5-lesson series on mastering the art of breathing light, which is a very relaxed, subtle creation of air hunger, which is like relaxation into a little bit of carbon dioxide buildup, which is safe and great to do for everybody. So the carbon dioxide is that big thing. With the Wim Hof method, understanding that when I have finished 3 rounds of that, my breathing is going to be influenced by the low levels of carbon dioxide that I've created as a result of that stacking effect of 3 rounds of hyperventilation and breath holding. You've seen the data. Yeah, it's much lower. We can go back. It's much lower at the end than it was at the start. So your breathing will be slow and calm because you've got a lower level of carbon dioxide that you're used to. But over time, that's going to start to train your chemoreceptor, your central chemoreceptors that are sensitive to carbon dioxide and pH, to potentially gradually find that that's normal. And that low level is going to make you more sensitive to carbon dioxide, potentially, if you don't do something. So this is where we're talking about how do I combine the two, and combining the 2 methods then starts to give you a powerful tool to use as both. So after you've done something, after you've done some rounds of Wim Hof, if that is what you want to do, because of the effects that you're seeing on how it makes you feel, how the effect on the nervous system, on inflammation, on the immune system, and seeing that the research has shown that, and it will be a reason why a lot of people want to get into it. And you also might love the stillness and the feeling. One of the things for me, when I've done the Wim Hof method, the stillness in the longer breath retentions, having got rid of all of the carbon dioxide, is a very peaceful feeling. I personally just don't get on with the hyperventilation side of it. That makes me feel more stressed rather than less. So it's something I have experienced and played with, and understanding from a physiological perspective then can make a informed decision for myself. I'm hoping to help you make an informed decision for yourself. Hopefully you're getting the understanding that I'm not saying do one is better than the other and do one and don't do the other. Just understand that combining the two might be a way forward to allow you to get the benefits of both. At the end of 3 rounds of the Wim Hof method, your CO2 levels are low. Spending some time, a few minutes, allowing them to get back up to normal through a breathing light or breath holding exercise would allow those CO2 levels to get back up to normal. So you'll have had the benefits of all of the low oxygen that you get, all of the improvements in inflammation markers that study had shown, but you're going to allow your normal day-to-day breathing restore back to a normal level of carbon dioxide. So if breathing light is probably the best way to do that for a few minutes afterwards, allow some air hunger to build back up, put in some soft breath holds as well, potentially to just allow that carbon dioxide to build up, rather than just having that one breath retention at the end and then going back into your normal day-to-day activities. And then, the other thing I've got on that slide to say, like, don't forget the functional breathing. So if your hyperventilation is breathing through the mouth and you're trying to get a lot of air in to try to make those sort of hormonal and nervous system and immunity changes and adaptations, then don't forget, if you don't know how to breathe well with your diaphragm and breathe in and out through your nose in your day-to-day life and during your normal exercises, so when you're not doing a Wim Hof practice, don't forget to teach yourself and learn good functional breathing mechanics and generate good habits for your normal day-to-day breathing, because that is paramount. Understanding how the diaphragm moves down and out, and how the rib cage moves and expands low down, and how we should be breathing through the nose and tongue position. And if you're watching this video, you probably have delved into understanding how breathing works a little bit. But if you haven't done, I've got my app has Pro Breathwork. Has a free foundations course, which has got 9 different lessons within the free foundations course, available on the Apple Store as well as Google Play. And you can download that, and there's lessons to work through. Is going to help you with understanding all of the basics of like functional breathing mechanics, how to work on your breathing light. And for those that haven't really delved into that and have only worked on the Wim Hof method, then you'll definitely enjoy, I'm sure, hopefully, but benefit from understanding some of those mechanics and understanding how to influence positively your biochemistry to help with your sort of day-to-day breathing that can then be combined in with your Wim Hof method practice. So I hope that's been helpful. There you can get on your screen potentially, if you can zap that with your phone and get to the App Store or the Google Play Store. If you have any questions about this, a lot of people have been asking for this video from me for quite a long time. I wanted to go into the science, I wanted to go into the detail, I wanted to have a little bit of fun at the start, so I hope you enjoyed the little bit of role play at the start. But hopefully that's made sense. If you do have questions, please do ask in the comments below. You can also email me, david.jackson@oxygenadvantage.com. I hope that the way that I've presented this has been in to the best of my knowledge, and in a non-judgmental, trying to just open up the conversation about what it is that we're doing with the breathing. And my biggest hope from someone watching this video is that you are able to make a bit of a more informed decision about the different breathing exercises that you do. You understand what it's doing to your body physiologically a little bit better, and then you can make a better decision about when and how often you do the various different practices that you may enjoy engaging with and feeling benefits from. So thank you for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed, wherever the subscribe thing will be, like, put it there or watch another video. There's a breathing light video on YouTube that I might be able to link to on the end of this if I can manage that. Otherwise, until next time, keep it nasal.